Since the conversation between the three of them is of no interest, we'd better use this time to recount something about this Nozdrov, whose role will not be at all unimportant in this narrative. Chances are that the reader is familiar with faces like Nozdrov's. Everyone has met many people of his sort. They are described as easygoing fellows, passed for good friends from childhood and school days on, and yet, now and then, they receive quite painful beatings. There is frankness, openness, and daring in their expressions. They are quick to make friends with you, and before you know it, they are addressing you familiarly. It looks as if their friendship will last till the grave, but it somehow always happens that you fall out on the very first evening at the very celebration of the friendship. They are always great talkers, great drinkers, daredevils, and generally very conspicuous people. At 35, Nozdrov was exactly the same as he had been at 20 and at 18, just eager to have a good time. Marriage had had no effect upon him, especially as, soon after it, his wife had departed for the other world, leaving him 2 children of whom he had no need whatsoever. There was, however, a rather pretty nurse who looked after them. He could never stay at home for more than a day at a time, since his nose would scent a fair going on anywhere within a radius of several scores of miles, with all the gatherings and balls that went with it. And in less time than it takes to blink an eyelid, he would be there, arguing and creating a rumpus at a card table because, like all his kind, he had a weakness for cards. And as we mentioned in Chapter 1, his card playing was not entirely above suspicion, since he showed great finesse in getting the card he happened to require. And thus the game often turned into another sort of sport. They would give him the boot, for instance, or else would twist and pull at his side whiskers a bit, so that he would return home with only one, and even that one would be considerably thinned out. But his full, healthy cheeks contained such power of growth that the side whiskers soon grew afresh, looking even more luxuriant than their predecessors. And the strangest thing about it, a thing which could only happen in Russia, was that after a short interval of time, he again met the same friends as though nothing had happened. There never seemed to be a grudge either on their side or on his. In a sense, Nozdrov was a businessman, because at every gathering at which he was present, some business was bound to occur. Something was bound to happen. Either the police would grab him by the arms and eject him from the premises, or this chore would be performed by his friends themselves. And if neither did so, something would still occur that could happen only to him. He'd get so drunk at the bar that he couldn't do anything but giggle, or he'd tell such tall tales that he felt bewildered himself. And the lies he elected to tell were quite unnecessary. He might suddenly assert that he had an azure blue or rose pink horse or some such rubbish, so that those around him would start working their way away from him, muttering, "Well, brother, it looks as though you're off on one of your lying sprees." There are people who, with or without reason, cannot resist playing a dirty trick on someone. Sometimes even a man of rank, decorated and of very dignified appearance, will shake you lengthily by the hand, talk to you of elevated, thought-provoking matters, and then, lo and behold, he'll pull his dirty shenanigans right in front of your nose, and he'll do it just like any ordinary petty official, and not at all like a decorated gentleman talking about elevated, thought-provoking matters. And there's nothing left for you to do but just stand there shrugging your shoulders in bewilderment. Well, Nozdrov had just such a weakness. The closer a friend he became with someone, the sooner he played a dirty trick on him. He would spread such stupid gossip about him that it was difficult to imagine anything more absurd. He had been known to break up marriages and business deals, and yet this never prevented him from considering himself his victim's friend. On the contrary, after doing something of the sort to you, he would greet you very warmly and address some reproach to you like, "Why, you dirty dog, you never drop in to see me these days." In some respects, Nozdrov was a many-faceted man. That is, a man ready to try his hand at anything. Within the same minute, he was likely to offer to follow you anywhere you could think of, to the ends of the earth, if need be, to enter into any imaginable business deal with you, to swap anything and everything with you. A gun, a horse, a dog, anything was an object of exchange. However, in this he was not motivated by profit, but rather by restlessness and the turbulence of his nature. If he was lucky enough to find a simple soul at a fair and to clean him out at cards, he would go on a buying spree, picking the first items that came into sight. Horse collars, incense, lengths of calico, candles, kerchiefs for his children's pretty nurse, a stallion, some raisins, a silver washstand, Holland linen, wheat, tobacco, pistols, some herring, oil paintings, a grindstone, pots, boots, chinaware, anything at all, for as long as the money lasted. It must be noted, however, that few of these things reached his house. Usually they were lost to some luckier gambler the very same day, and with them would go his personal pipe, mouthpiece and all, and his tobacco pouch, and, on some occasions, even his four in hand, along with the coach and even the driver. And then Nozdrov, with only his coat or his jacket left, would be looking for a friend to ask him for a lift. That's how Nozdrov was. Maybe some will contend that this is just a stereotype and that anyway there are no such people left today. Alas, they would be wrong. The Nozdrovs won't disappear from the face of the earth for a long time to come. There are plenty of them among us, although perhaps they wear different coats. But then, to unperceptive people, a man wearing a different coat seems a different man. Meanwhile, the three carriages had driven up to Nozdrov's house. No preparations had been made to receive them. Wooden trestles stood in the center of the dining room, with two servants mounted on them, whitewashing the wall and chanting some interminable song. Whitewash was spattered all over the floor. Nozdrov immediately ordered the men and the trestles out of his sight and rushed off to issue instructions. The guests heard him ordering dinner for the cook, and Chichikov, already working up an appetite, realized that they wouldn't sit down to the table before 5. Nozdrov returned and took his guests out to show them around his village. After 2 hours, he had showed them absolutely everything, and there was nothing left to show. First, they went to the stables. There they found 2 mares, one a gray piebald, the other a light chestnut. Then a bay stallion, not much to look at, but for which, so he swore, Nozdrov had paid 10,000 rubles. "You didn't pay 10,000 for him," his brother-in-law said. "He's not even worth 1,000. "I swear I paid 10,000. "You can swear until tomorrow," the brother-in-law said. "Would you like to bet on it?" But his brother-in-law didn't wish to bet. Then Nozdrov took them to the stalls that had previously been occupied by thoroughbreds but now sheltered nothing but a goat, which, according to ancient superstition, had to keep the horses company and which seemed to get along fine with them, walking under their bellies and feeling perfectly at home. After that, Nozdrov showed them a wolf cub on a chain. "See this little wolf? I feed him nothing but raw meat. I want him to grow up wild." They visited a pond in which, Nozdrov assured them, there were fish so large that it took 2 men and a lot of trouble to pull one out. His brother-in-law, however, expressed his skepticism. "Wait, Chichikov," Nozdrov said. "I must show you a fantastic pair of hounds. They're all black, and their hindquarters are incredibly hard, and their bristles are as sharp as needles." He led them to a very pretty little house surrounded by a fairly spacious, fenced-in yard. Inside the yard, they found all sorts of dogs, shaggy and smooth-haired, of every color and breed. Tan, black with white markings, purplish and white, tan and white, red and white, black-eared, gray-eared. These animals were called by every possible name. Some had names that were verbs in the imperative, like shoot, shout, soar, scorch, stab. Others were called squint-eye, reward, protector. Nozdrov behaved like a father among his children. And they, on catching sight of the guests, stuck their tails in the air like rudders and rushed to welcome them. About a dozen or so of the dogs placed their forepaws on Nozdrov's shoulders. Shout took to Chichikov immediately and, standing up on his hind legs, gave him a big lick with his tongue right on the lips, causing Chichikov to spit then and there. They examined the black dogs with the incredibly hard hindquarters and agreed that they were very fine animals. Then they paid a visit to a Crimean bitch that was already blind and soon to die, but which, according to Nozdrov, had been a very fine bitch only a couple of years before. Then they had a look at the watermill. The part on which the upper millstone rests as it revolves around the shaft was missing. "We're now about to reach the blacksmith's," Nozdrov announced, and after a short walk, they did find a blacksmith's and visit it. "You see that field over there?" Nozdrov said, pointing. "There are so many hares there, you can't see the ground for them. The other day, I even caught one by the hind legs with my bare hands." "Well, I say you couldn't catch a hare with your bare hands." "But I tell you I did, whether you like it or not. And now," he said to Chichikov, "I'll show you the boundary line of my land." Nozdrov preceded his guests across a field that consisted, to a large extent, of hummocks. Then they had to make their way between fallow lands and plowed fields. Chichikov was growing tired. The soil was so marshy that now and then water squelched under their feet. At first they set their feet down carefully, but after a while, seeing that it was futile, they walked straight ahead without bothering to see whether the layer of mud under their feet was deeper or shallower. After covering quite a distance, they finally saw the boundary, which consisted of a wooden marker and a narrow trench. "Here's the frontier," Nozdrov announced. "All you can see on this side is mine. And as a matter of fact, even on the other side, see that wood over there? It belongs to me too. And everything beyond it." "Since when has that wood been yours? Did you buy it recently or what?" the brother-in-law wanted to know. "It didn't belong to you a short while ago." "Yes, I bought it quite recently." "How were you able to acquire it so quickly?" "I bought it the day before yesterday, and I paid a damn high price for it, too." "How could you?" "You were at the fair." "Oh, you're a real yokel. As if it were impossible to be at a fair and buy a piece of land at the same time." "Unless it was your estate manager who did the purchasing," the brother-in-law gave up, still doubting, and shaking his head skeptically. The guests returned to the house by the same unpleasant route. Nozdrov took them to his study, which, by the way, contained none of the items studies usually have, such as books or papers. Instead, they found a few sabers and 2 shotguns, one worth 300 rubles and the other 800, hanging on the walls. The brother-in-law looked at them and merely shook his head. Then they were shown genuine Turkish daggers, one of which had engraved on it by mistake, "Swordsmith, Savily Sibiriakov." Then the guests were invited to admire a barrel organ, and Nozdrov immediately started to grind out some music for their benefit. The organ produced a not unpleasant sound, but in the middle of the performance something happened, and a mazurka turned into Malbruk Sin Vatin Gwar, and that in turn ended in a popular waltz. Long after Nozdrov had stopped turning the handle, an extraordinarily energetic reed in the organ went on whistling all by itself. Then pipes appeared on the scene. Wooden pipes, clay pipes, meerschaum pipes, some new, some broken in, some in and some out of chamois covers, a recently won short pipe with an amber mouthpiece and a tobacco pouch embroidered by a countess who had met Nozdrov at some way station or other and fallen head over heels in love with him, and whose little hands were, as he put it, the most subtle superfluities. This, apparently, an attempt on his part to convey the highest point of perfection.